Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Rebecca Rouse, Associate Professor in the Division of Game Development at University of Skövde, Sweden.
Hi, I'm Charles. I'm Rebecca's son. I'm an 11-year-old in the 4th grade at Tidan School in Tidan, Sweden. And our talk will share about our experiences designing an interactive narrative board game for cultural heritage in Sweden.
This was funded through an EU seed funding project called Enrich, Enhancing Digital Inclusion for Cultural and Natural Heritage, and we developed a board game about a Viking-era stone ship monument with the goal to increase heritage engagement for young people in a rural area. This EU project was a collaboration between University of Skövde, Sweden, University Chieti Pescara in Italy, and University of Oviedo in Spain.
The game we made was called Sagostenen, or the Story Stones, and it tells the story of a Viking stone setting called Askeberga Stone Ship. The Askeberga Stone Ship has 24 large stones, each about 2 meters high, arranged in a 55-meter long and 18-meter wide oval. Very few historical and archaeological facts are known about the stones, which gives them an air of mystery.
We chose the Askeberga site for our project on increasing inclusion in cultural and natural heritage not only because the site is fascinating, but also because of its location on the outskirts of a small rural village in Sweden with a population of about 1,000 people. Heritage projects are often focused in cities, at museums, and larger or more developed sites, so our focus on an underdeveloped rural site was a way of including groups often overlooked in heritage work. Our approach to working with Askeberga was to organize a series of conversations, workshops, and playtests to develop a series of projects aimed at reaching a diverse range of stakeholders, and one of these projects ended up being the board game. At a series of meetings with the Stone Ship Steering Group and Local History Society, we learned a lot of information about the site and its heritage. We also shared information with the group about different design approaches to working with heritage and information about prior projects we worked on in a similar vein. Together, we brainstormed possible ideas for a creative heritage project, for everything from an interactive LARP-style theatrical performance to a video game to a tabletop role-playing game. Following our meeting, one recurring theme emerged: just how few archaeological and historical facts are known about the stones, and how these mysteries serve only to enhance the stones' enigmatic quality. Because the steering group had a desire to reach a younger group of stakeholders, the seniors are those who make up the steering group, I had an initial idea to develop a tabletop role-playing game in which players co-create a narrative about traveling back in time to visit the stones during key time periods. However, as I sat down to try and author the TTRPG, I kept feeling stuck by the lack of definitive information about the stones.
My mom discussed the design problem with me over dinner one evening, and I became interested and shared an innovative solution to which was an interactive narrative problem. Instead of being disturbed by all the blanks in the story, I started to think as it was an opportunity for humor and use a MATLAB type structure to facilitate in-game story co-creation. My mom really liked this idea and invited me to join the project as a co-designer, and I did. This is not our first time making a game together. We made a board game called Paddington Squish back in 2021, which you see the picture here. We ended up not making a TTRPG, instead of switching to a board game. This was because I felt the TTRPG had too long of a playthrough time. My advice for making a game that will appeal for all ages was keep it to a 20-minute playthrough time and focus on making people laugh and finding humorous ways to tell about the story. We worked together over 2 weeks to make a playable paper prototype version of the board game to try out a playtest. You can see our early sketches here. And finally we came up with Sagostenen, or the Story Stones. The backstory of the game is that all players have landed back in time in the year 250 AD, right before the stones were put in place. The player's objective is to walk around the edge of the stone setting to come back to modern day. The play moves forward via dice rolls as well as movements indicated by special spaces on the board itself. Every now and then, the play is stopped by one of the 6 story gates that must be opened to proceed further into time. At each story gate, the player who is farthest from the gate reads out and fills in a MATLAB-style story with missing words. The remaining of players will shout out ideas, filling in the blanks. The sillier the better. the story forms are filled in and then folded in and hidden in the ferryman's boat in the middle of the board until the end of the game.
As with Mad Libs, those calling out the words to fill in the blanks are given no context for their choices, so that random silliness ensues and ensures a final result that's humorous to read out. Once a story gate is opened, all may pass through. The first player to make it back around the stones is the winner, and he or she has the pleasure of reading aloud all the stories from the ferryman's boat. After developing a full-sized paper prototype and testing it together, we took the prototype to a series of playtests with different stakeholders to gather feedback on the design. The first playtest was at University of Skövde with 2 game development faculty members who had a good laugh with the game and connected with its humor. They provided us valuable feedback, in particular on game balance.
The second playtest was at the Teton History Museum with the members of the Stone Steering Group and Historical Society. Interestingly, the game was very difficult for this group. They did not have as much grammar knowledge, being they was hard to come up with particular parts of speech at the story gates. This led to a feeling of pressure to perform and made the game less fun. In addition, we tried to explain that the objective was to be silly and provide nonsense words, but the playtesters were fixated on providing accurate words which related to the history of the stones. This meant that ending and story lacked humor and fell a bit flat.
However, we received many helpful suggestions for the game which we did take on board, such as using a well-known rhyme for teaching the parts of speech, adding visual depictions of several more village landmarks to the board artwork, and adding more special spaces to the board, and requiring the winner to have an exact roll to reach the final space, thus giving more time for others to catch up and make the competition closer and more exciting. In a discussion following the playtest, the testers let us know many in the seniors generation had left school at a young age, as it was not yet compulsory in Sweden during that generation, and so their knowledge of grammar is intrinsic and not academic. They suggested having a pre-written deck of cards with the missing words to draw from for the story gate sections. But we chose not to take on that idea because it was in opposition to the goals for the game in terms of humor, spontaneity, and collaborative creativity.
In our own reflection together after this playtest, I shared my conclusion that the game would be better played with children, since that grown-ups have a much more difficult time being silly. And this ability to be silly is a requirement for the game to work and be fun. Based on this idea, we decided to do a playtest with the local elementary school. The next playtest was at Teton Elementary School in the 4th grade classroom with 6 students playing and the teacher looking on. This group of players was by far most engaged, laughing and joking together throughout the playtest. And from the first few minutes of play, they expressed directly how much they liked the game. They also let us know about giving us some further Swedish language mistakes in our part, giving us more common slang terms to use for phrases like rolling the dice. And this group enjoyed the game so much they wanted to keep playing past the set time for the activity. There was no issues for this group in terms of understanding the need for silliness and creativity, and since they were currently at the age for studying grammatical parts of speech, their knowledge required was accessible for them. The teacher was pleased that the game included multiple content areas: reading, writing, grammar, heritage knowledge, collaboration, turn-taking.
Reflecting on everything we learned from these playtests, we worked to implement all the changes suggested, with the exception of that idea about a deck of cards with pre-written words, which we felt didn't fit the spirit of the game. So here you see a picture of the rest of the play materials that accompany the board, the pieces and the dice, but also the laminated story cards and whiteboard markers. The final playtest took place at the grant project's concluding public presentation located at the Askeberga Stones in Teton. Now this playtest, we had a group of master's students from the game development programs at University of Skövde playing the game. They were moderately engaged in the gameplay, not to the same degree as the elementary students. They also provided feedback on the refinement of the Swedish language in the game and remarked on the humor of the game positively, and they felt the mechanics of the game were a good fit for the humorous tone. In conclusion, we felt the prototype was positively developed through this series of multiple playtests, which not only led to many improvements in the game, but also to the identification of the best audiences for the game, elementary school students and young adults. In addition to these groups' positive engagement with the game, the elementary school teachers' enthusiasm for the game as a multi-subject learning tool led us to conclude next steps should be to seek funds to develop it for classroom use. In addition, we're interested in seeking funding to develop a game-making kit for classroom use so that elementary students could, with their teachers' help, design and prototype their own board games to enhance learning across a wide range of subject areas.
In terms of our design process, we felt it was important that our design team had a grown-up and a child. We felt this special collaboration was a big reason for the success of the project. We would like to encourage more game design researchers to consider co-designing and researching together with a child because we're natural experts at play. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, and we look forward to hearing if you have any questions.